In the quiet, a father enters his son's dimly lit room, a nightly routine that offers comfort in the darkness. The room, filled with the familiar scent of a child's dreams and occasional nightmares, has always been a sanctuary for the 7-year-old boy. Tonight, though, there's a distinct change in the air, an unsettling shift that the father can sense but can't quite identify. The father's gaze falls upon his son, tucked under his blanket, face illuminated by the soft glow of a nightlight. A grin stretches across the boy's face, a grin far too wide for a typical evening. It's a grin that seems to pull at the corners of reality, tugging at the father's intuition that something is not quite right. "You okay, buddy?" The father's voice breaks the silence, a sound as familiar as the beating of his own heart. The question hangs in the air for a moment, a simple inquiry carrying the weight of a father's concern. The son nods. The grin remains plastered on his face, a chilling contrast to his usual innocent smile. His voice, usually sweet and filled with the energy of youth, is eerily calm as he makes a simple request. "Daddy, check for monsters under my bed." The father, despite his growing unease, can't help but chuckle. It's a sound that echoes around the room, a feeble attempt to dispel the tension that's begun to creep into their nightly routine. The request is not unusual. It's been a part of their ritual for as long as he can remember. A ritual designed to banish the fears that lurk in the shadows, to reassure his son that he is safe from the monsters that reside only in his imagination. A chuckle slipped from the father's lips as he got down on his knees, preparing to check under the bed. He's about to discover, though, that sometimes the monsters are not just in our heads, and the most terrifying horrors are those that hide in plain sight. The father, expecting nothing more than dust bunnies, peers under the bed. His heart beats rhythmically in his chest, the anticipation of the unknown making it pound louder. The air feels heavy, almost as if it's trying to smother him. The room is silent save for his pounding heart and the faint rustle of his son's blanket above him. He's ready for the usual, toys forgotten in the heat of play or the odd sock. What he's not ready for is the sight that greets him. His breath catches in his throat as he sees his son, his real son, crouched under the bed. The boy's skin is pale, drained of color, his eyes wide and filled with terror. The father's mind whirls, trying to comprehend the impossible reality before him. He stares at his child, the boy he had just spoken to, now hiding under the bed. He's frozen in place, his heart now a wild drum in his chest. In the eerie silence of the room, his son's voice slices through, a whisper barely louder than a breath. "Daddy, there's someone on my bed!" The words hang heavily in the air, each one wrapping around the father like tendrils of icy fear. The room, once filled with the innocence of a child, now feels sinister and threatening. The father's mind races, each thought more terrifying than the last. Who or what is on his son's bed? The familiar, comforting surroundings of his home now feel like a nightmare from which he cannot wake. The realization hits him like a punch in the gut. The monster his son was afraid of was not under the bed, but on it. His son's grin, that unsettling, unnatural grin, was not his son's. Under the bed in the shadowy darkness, his son's terrified voice whispered, "Daddy, there's someone on my bed." The father's world spins, his heart pounds, his blood runs cold. This is a nightmare, he tells himself, but he knows deep down, it's far from a dream. It's a horrifying reality. Reality begins to warp as the father is faced with an impossible situation. A cold shiver runs down his spine as he locks eyes with the terrified boy under the bed. His son, the same boy who, moments ago, had been grinning at him from atop the bed. His heart hammers in his chest like a frantic drummer, each beat echoing the horrifying question. Who is the real son? His gaze flicks back to the child on the bed, still grinning, still waiting. The room, once a sanctuary of dreams and bedtime stories, now feels like a coliseum of nightmares. The father feels an icy chill creep up his spine, his breath hitching in his throat. The boy's grin widens, the dim light casting eerie shadows over his face. The father swallows hard, his stomach a knot of dread. Torn between the two, the father is paralyzed, his mind racing with impossible scenarios. Could his son have a doppelganger? Or is one of them a horrifying entity, wearing his son's face like a mask? He feels the room closing in on him, the walls pressing against his sanity, pushing him towards the edge of reason. He tries to speak, to call out to his son, but the words die on his lips, swallowed by the oppressive silence. The boy under the bed, his eyes wide with terror, whispers again, "Daddy, there's someone on my bed." The voice is a desperate plea, a lifeline thrown into the sea of his confusion. The father's mind reels, the horrifying reality sinking its claws deeper into him. His son is both on the bed and under it. His world splits into two, each half a mirror image of the other, reflecting back his fear in the terrified eyes of the boy under the bed and the chilling grin of the boy on it. In this moment, the father's world splits into two, the son on the bed and the son under it. In a world where monsters can wear the face of a child, the father is left with an impossible choice. The father's heart pounded in his chest, the sound echoing in his ears like a drum of impending doom. His eyes darted between the frightened figure beneath the bed and the grinning doppelganger atop it. The room seemed to close in, suffocating him with the chilling reality of the situation. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to grab his real son and run, yet the grinning creature on the bed held him in place with a paralyzing gaze. The smile was a grotesque caricature of his son's, a chilling reminder of the terror that had infiltrated their safe haven. Yet the fear in the eyes of his real son, lying beneath the bed, was an even more horrifying sight. How could he choose between his flesh and blood and a monster wearing his son's face? Could he even trust his own judgment? What if he was wrong? The question swirled in his mind like a tornado, tearing at the fabric of his sanity. He was trapped in a nightmare from which he couldn't awaken. The father's breath hitched in his throat as he realized the horrifying truth. He was caught in a twisted game of life and death, a pawn on a chessboard he didn't even know he was playing. The realization hung in the air like a specter, casting long shadows of dread that seemed to darken the room further. His hands trembled as he reached out, uncertainty gnawing at his resolve. The decision was a razor's edge, cutting deep into his soul. Who was he to play God, to decide who lived and who died? The weight of the decision bore down on him, threatening to crush him under its enormity. The room fell into an eerie silence, the tension palpable. The father's gaze flickered between his real son and the monster, each second ticking by like a countdown to the inevitable. In the chilling silence, the father is left with an impossible choice, a choice no parent should ever have to make.